What would you say to somebody in if they asked you, how do I create music that is timeless?
I mean,
There's 1,000 answers, but what's yours?
Yeah, I think like within the asker lies the answer, like sort of a bizarre kind of Zen Buddhist way to think about that, of which I know absolutely nothing. But
So let's talk about it.
yeah. So I'll pontificate on Zen Buddhism. I'm a guy with glasses and a beard.
All right, if you have to walk off, if you have to turn it off now, guys, we understand. But we're about to hop in.
It's the idea that like from within, your most authentic self is going to be the thing that no one else can ever touch. They can't touch it.
Let's take a spin.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Let's Take a Spin. My name is Rob Tait. I'm your host, drummer, singer, songwriter. I do a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm so glad you're back. Welcome back to Let's Take a Spin. Today we have a really great episode with Dan Drago of the 25 O'Clock podcast. And Dan had the foresight to not mention some pretty big news until the very end of the pod, so make sure to stick to the end, and we'll talk about it. But 25 O'Clock, well, let me give some details, a little story. 25 O'Clock podcast has been around for 10 years. They're celebrating 10 years of introducing some of Philadelphia's finest musicians and bands. Without him, we would have never heard of, or we would have had the inkling to check them out, unless, you get Dan's seal of approval. And Dan, he has great taste, and he's a great man, and I'm honored to call him a friend. And he's got a lot happening in his life, so make sure to go check out every single podcast. There's 10 years worth of stuff, and I've been on there twice on his podcast, and it's been an honor and a privilege. And one thing we forgot to mention on the podcast is something that Dan is very proud of. He's going to be releasing a compilation record on Bandcamp called Want to Play a Song? Live on 25 O'Clock, Volume 1. The compilation will feature past guest live performances, with all the proceeds going to Philly Music Fest, a nonprofit music festival that raises money for the next generations of Philadelphia musicians. And Philly Music Fest has been so important to the community, Dan says, and not just the bands and the audiences who come each night. Philly Music Fest has raised over $500,000 for local music education since their inception in 2017. Anything can help, and he just wants to do it. And this compilation seems like a great way to help. So go to Bandcamp, 25 O'Clock, and it's going to be listed in the show notes. And all the money goes straight to Philly Music Fest, and it's a great way to help the Philly local scene and the community grow even larger than it was with Dan's help. And with that, I just want you guys to enjoy the podcast with Dan Drago of 25 O'Clock. But real quick, I have some dates. On November 22nd, I will be in New Hope at Dharma Bums with my band. We'll be playing a bill with Elephant, the band. It's going to be a great night of live music. And of course, Chill AF New Year's Eve is weeks away, less than 2 months. Emmett Druding and his band will be on the bill, along with the Sophie Corin duo. Now, it's going to be a night full of great live music and a great hang and great tunes and great people. Remember, this is not like your typical New Year's Eve. It's not crazy folks at the bar getting hammered drunk. This is a good vibe. It's a good time. And you can be chill. You don't have to stay at home. Come and hang out with us at Fat Lady Brewing Company. Tickets are in the show notes. And of course, my record is on sale. You can buy all the vinyls and stuff at my live shows. And it's been great. And I'm so happy you guys have embraced these tunes. Anyway, without further ado, I could talk forever. Here is Dan Drago of the 25 O'Clock podcast on this week's Let's Take a Spin. I'm capturing it all.
Gotcha.
But yeah, have you ever used Riverside before?
I use it sometimes when I do stuff with Nate.
Okay, yeah, me and him were talking about that at the Philly Music Fest.
At the
WXPN
Inside Hustle.
Yeah, and it's a great program. But Nate is a very sweet guy from That's My John.
He's the best.
He's the best. How did you guys meet?
He was doing a show, and I was doing a show, and I found that we were like starting to overlap a little bit. So of course I was just like, all right, who's this guy? Sort of like determine, I'm like, is this guy gonna be my friend, or am I never gonna have anything to do with this guy?
Or foe?
It's not foes. It's just like, some people get into doing this kind of thing for self-serving purposes, and I needed to suss him out, and immediately I was just like, oh, you're a dude, like you love this as much as I do. Okay, cool. Now we're friends.
Yeah, I could tell, like at the Inside Hustle event that you were working at. I got to meet so many people, but you guys were definitely like share a kinship.
Yeah. Phil too, from Your Next Favorite Band up in Allentown, up in the Lehigh Valley.
Yeah, Bethlehem.
Bethlehem,
Allentown.
not Allentown. You have to be careful because they're right
they
next
get mad,
to.
right?
I know, right? There are other things that one could get mad about, but sure, okay, yeah. I mean, as Philly, we hate to be mistaken for literally anything but what we are. So it's just, we don't like. I don't know, if you're from Jersey and like you say you're from Philly, people are like very quick to correct you. If you're from the main line and you say you're from Philly, I'm very quick to correct.
Oh, 1,000%. I hate that. You live in Bryn Mawr. That's not the same.
Now, I understand, like, if you go to, like, California and someone says, where are you from? You're just like, oh, I'm from the Philadelphia area. Like, okay, makes sense. Like, if you travel internationally, most people don't know what the hell Philadelphia is.
They don't. No.
I get to explain it to people, and they're just like, how close to New York? I'm like, about 2 hours. I'm like, and I always say, I'm like, but very different world.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes and no. For me, I usually tell people, like, Philly is just a dirty version of Chicago.
Yeah.
Have you been to Chicago before?
Yeah. I've been to Chicago. I love Chicago.
Oh, it's amazing.
But, like, I don't know. I'm always, like, hesitant to, like, bring in, like, because we get kind of hit with that label all the time. It's a dirty city, Philadelphia, Philadelphia, all that. And I'm just like, we have the same problems as any, like, middle or like lightly impoverished, or not even that lightly impoverished, like any sort of semi-impoverished major city. Like, we have the same problems, the same problems as a Detroit, or a Minneapolis, or or wherever. The same problems that New York had in the 90s and early aughts. We have those problems and had those problems then too. For me, it's like, it's not about what city you're from. It's like, are you city people or are you like suburb people who like look at the city and be like, what's going on over there? And I'd be like, nothing. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't take a look behind the curtain, please don't.
No, it's just like, if that's how you want to enter the conversation, if that's the spirit that you are coming to Philadelphia in, then I'm just like, get out of here. Like, now if you're coming in just like, hey, I've heard things, but what's real, and you're like talking to an actual Philadelphian, then I'm like, okay, cool, you're on a fact-finding mission, and that makes sense. But like, people sit on the main line and be like, oh, we don't go to the city no more. And I'm just like, you never did, so hush your face.
Oh, 100%. You know what's funny? My parents did the same thing. They moved. Yeah. My parents moved to South Jersey. They're like, oh my God, we can go to the city. We can go do all this stuff. And guess how many times they went to the city?
Never.
When I was performing there.
Oh, well.
Never, just on a whim, or barely. But you know what's funny? So, you're on to celebrate your 10 years of podcasting.
We're rolling, right?
We've been rolling.
I've talked all this. Can I cuss on this podcast? I've talked all this shit on the main line, and I'm just like, okay, we're rolling, right? And it wasn't like, I don't want you to put that in. I was like, please put all of that in.
Oh no, it's going. It's in the front. so
I love it.
We're celebrating 10 years, a decade of 25 O'Clock podcast. And so you've met everybody across the gambit. People from LA, people from Chicago, people across Detroit, across the US, and probably internationally too. I'm not sure how many international folks you've spoken to on your podcast. But
if they're from Philadelphia or they have some Philadelphia tie, like, certainly. I just actually recently got back in touch with a friend of mine. His name is Barish Kaya. He's originally from Istanbul, and he has an amazing band called Baraka. They're like a Turkish kind of folk rock band. They're really great. And pandemic kind of scattered everyone to the four winds, and you're still kind of picking up pieces of casual relationships. But he reached out to me with like some questions about booking and stuff like that, and like boom. And he's an amazing dude. And again, not from Philly. So like when I interviewed him way back in the day, very, very cool perspective on, what it's like to be here, versus what it's like to be somewhere else. So I always enjoy that.
Was he in Istanbul at the time?
No. He's lived here for a long time.
Okay.
He goes back and forth, obviously, because his family is there. But yeah, great dude. Just one of the sweetest people I know. Huge metalhead. There's something about guys like who grew up in that era in like Europe, and particularly the Middle East. I've met a lot of guys around my age or like a little older who grew up, in the Middle East. Like all of them cite like that one Metallica tour that like came through in the late 80s as being like like this ground, like it awakened this whole generation of young people in other countries, because like those bands had the money to play literally anywhere there was electricity. But like, if you ever see like photos of like, it was late 80s, early 90s, there's like some Metallica tour. It was probably a big like threat. It was probably like Megadeth was probably there, maybe Slayer, who knows. And you just look out and it's just like, it's like 100,000 people.
But it's the only metal show that'll be there in 5 years, and everyone just...
People who probably didn't even know what it is. We have no idea what this is, but like the entire town and all the surrounding towns are going. So I guess we're going. It's like a soccer game or something.
It's true, but you know what's funny? Speaking of soccer and music, is just like out in certain countries, there's not as much to do, right? So like people flock to this stuff, especially football or soccer. You know?
If you're dialed into any sort of Western culture, and now it's different probably with the internet, you can access a lot of things, but like in the late 80s, early 90s, if you lived in Istanbul and like Metallica came and you were even remotely interested in like Western rock, like American rock music, you figured out how to go.
1,000%. Like I will sit on the rafters of the building across the street if I have to.
And I'm sure people did.
I know there's photos out there. We can probably put it up now, but I won't because I'm lazy. But 10 years of the podcast, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's so amazing. But going back to kind of like city folk and suburb folk, we'll call them, like in terms of the music that's made, can you tell a distinction between a city musician and a suburb musician or band?
I mean, on sound, certainly not. No.
Well, I was just curious if there's something that you've noticed from your perspective.
No, I mean, I meet people from all over, and I think, like, it's funny. Sometimes I'll meet people and be like, you live in the city, right? And they're like, no, we live over the bridge in Collingswood or something like that. Which, like, please know, like, despite all my shit talk about the main line and not even Jersey, I dig Jersey, but, like, when it comes to bands and artists, like, I draw a pretty decently sized circle around the city to count. Like, if you're from the main line, you're a Philly band to me. If you're from, Jersey, mid southern Jersey, you're Philly. You can be a Philly band. If you're from Wilmington, like, I'm like, close enough.
Agreed. But as long as they're honest with, we're from such and such, as long as they don't say like you're a Philly band, no. People have to accept you as one.
Yeah.
You don't get to say you're one.
Yeah.
Or even New York too.
Yeah. I'll meet bands that I swear, I'm like, wait, you live in Fishtown, West Philly? And they're just like, no, we live somewhere else. So I'm like, cool. Like, and the reason I usually have that question is because if I see them like super active in the city, playing shows, going to open mic, being at other people's shows too, like, I just assume if I like keep running into you, I'm like, well, you got to be close, right? And some of people like, they'll live out in the Western burbs, or they'll live, I've met people like live in Quakertown who are like in bands and like they come down regularly. So that's, if anything, I'm like, that's actually more devotion than maybe some of us who live here.
Yeah, because they put way more time into building that community.
Yeah, and it's intentional. It's an intentional visit to Philadelphia. It's not like I'm walking around and it's Wednesday and I'm like, oh, so-and-so's playing at Johnny Brenda's. Yeah, I'll go,
Oh, it's so easy for us that we don't know how good we have, especially with shows. In fact, like we said in the beginning of the pod, is like the Inside Hustle. I almost didn't go, and you were there, and I was like, okay, I'll go see it. And I'm so glad that I did, because Devin Gilfillian and his drummer/manager, John, spoke, and I learned a lot from John.
That was a great conversation. Yeah, and I know, obviously, I know Devin is, but I didn't really know much about his path or any of that. So that was very, very cool. Yeah, very interesting aspect to get of a business. People will be like, yeah, we did LA, we did Nashville, this is what we've learned. I wish there would have been a little more Philly content in that conversation, but I mean, he doesn't live here currently, so maybe I was expecting things that weren't going to happen.
Well, I mean, we're all trying to figure out how to get out of Philly. Sorry, I said that all wrong. Like Philly, for me and for you, Philly is a home base, right? But we're like, this is great, but you don't know what we're doing outside of here. For me,
I guess you mean everyone's trying to figure out how to break out of Philly. Maybe not leave, but like it's like, okay, so how can I get my show on the road? Like, how can I do as well as maybe I do in Philadelphia as in the Washington D.C. area or Boston or or Chicago or something like that. Yeah, I definitely understand that. But in terms of a home base, I mean, like I've been here for over 20 years, and like this is a great place to be.
It is. And you know what's funny? You've done this for so long now that you can actually tell us bands that you started out with in the beginning episodes and you actually saw the trajectory change or grow.
Yeah.
Who are some acts or musicians that you've seen from the beginning of your podcast, or even since you lived here and you've had them on the pod multiple times and they've grown exponentially? Who would you say?
I can definitely think of a lot of bands that I was getting into when I first moved here. I mean, bands like Dr. Dog, Man Man.
Did you ever have Dr. Dog on your podcast?
I've never had anyone. I'd love to talk to Eric.
He
Eric
would
Slick.
love to come on.
Eric Slick, like, I just dig him as his general presence. Like, he and I maybe have met once or twice, like, just in like, hey, this is Eric. I'm like, hi. And then, away we go. And like, yeah, but I've never had him. I've always wanted to have him on because he, not just Dr. Dog too. He's been involved in everything. Like, and I love those people who have been in, like, they start in one band and you look up, they've been in like 7 bands. They've been backing up like another 10 people. Like my buddy Jonas Osterly, who, was Clap Your Hands, Say Yes, touring drummer for the longest time, but also in the Teeth, who were like a beloved Philadelphia band and like got back together and got to open for Dr. Dog at the Man. I did not make that show, but I joked that like, well, that was a regular Who's Who that night. Like everyone was a Dr. Dog at the Man. And I joked, I said like, how many people left after the Teeth? No,
that's interesting.
No shade on Dr. Dog. But it gets
but
late.
If it's a reunion show, you're like, you want to go see that band. You're like, Dr. Dog I've seen before they left.
Yeah. And also like you could go see Teeth at Johnny Brenda's and I think get a different kind of experience right there.
Well, you're somebody who loves intimate performances, like I know that you love Johnny Brenda's and I know that you love a lot of those smaller venues. If you had to make like a top 3 of intimate venues that you love, what would they be in Philly?
I mean, Brenda's is pretty intimate. It's like 250, and you get the upper area. I love a small venue with an upper balcony or mezzanine. I just think it's cool. I love like staring over the top of everyone's heads like while they play at Johnny Brenda's. It's really fun.
You're looking for bald spots?
We've all, it's, what are you going to do? It's all part of the game.
It's part of life.
I'm trying to think like other small places that I really enjoy. I loved the old Boot and Saddle. That was one of my favorite spots, but I love going to shows now that it's Solar Myth. And I love going to those Ars Nova Workshop, jazz and experimental music shows. Cause one, like I see music that I have not that I don't have context. I can't do that. So I love watching, like Nazir Ebo play or something like that, or watch like Steve Gunn, like go up there with his drummer, Trzynski and like just improvise an entire set. I love going up and seeing whatever bizarre lineup Charlie Hall has put together to like play like, classic Miles Davis records or something like that. So I love the Solar Myth room. People kind of like made faces. They're just like, oh, is it different? I'm like, the room is exactly the same. Like you go in the back room at Solar Myth. If you went to Boot and Saddle, it's exactly the same room.
Really? They didn't change a thing. They just different ownership.
They didn't change a thing. Like the booth is where it is. Like, everything's where it is. Like
is
just
the booth
sometimes
still
there's
there?
chairs. Yeah, the booth's still there. Yeah, so sometimes there's chairs, which is nice because I'm old and I like to sit down on a chair.
You're not alone.
Yeah,
I work for a living on a chair. I also like to watch shows in a chair.
Chairs are great. I love a good chair show. I love
my God.
Yeah, I love it.
In fact,
if I could couch show, even better.
Yeah, but my back is so bad. I mean, I'm 34. I know you were 34 as well. I can't.
I'm not 34. I'm 44.
You know what? Then the article that talked about a decade of the podcast said 34. And
I started when I was 30. I started the show when I was 34. Yeah.
I was like, damn, I didn't know me and Dan were the same age.
Oh, no. God, that's so nice of you to even like entertain that thought for a sec. To think that it was plausible.
It's plausible. People, can look a little older and be younger, or vice versa.
I mean, it was so funny. I was on with Nate Runkle and Bruce Warren for their Tool to New podcast. And Bruce is like, Dan brings the average age way down. And I'm just like, how old do you think I am, Bruce? Like, but the other way. I'm just like, I'm not a kid, Bruce. I'm not 32.
But it's good that he views you as youthful, though. That's a great thing to have.
I view you as youthful, so it's a.
Not for long. I've been meeting a lot of 20-somethings that are coming up right behind me, and I go, crap, how are they so advanced?
No, but it's fun though. No, I'll speak to that. Like, I love meeting these musicians that are like maybe 25, 26, kind of in that early mid-20s era. And like, I think back to myself when I was that age in bands, like trying to figure it all out. I look at them and I'm just like, some of you got like so far ahead of where we were. Like, it blows my mind, not just from an organizational standpoint and like, booking and touring and all that, but just like the breadth of musical knowledge they have, how well listened some of these cats are. Because I think that's very, very important as a musician or any kind of artist, or anything that you get into. If you want to write good books, you should read a lot of books. And if you want to make great records and make great music, you have to listen to a ton of music.
Mm-hmm.
And not just like the kind of music that you make. Like you should listen to everything. There's something to be grabbed from every single aspect and genre. Even, in pop music, like listen to pop music, figure out what is it about pop songs that, that drive people a certain way, because people who are into pop music aren't necessarily like, and this is, I'm not trying to make a generalization, but maybe not generally into like the deep dive, weird crate diggy stuff that like guys like you and I, people like you and I might be into. And that's no knock. Like not everyone engages with music in the ways that people like you and I might. And when I was younger, I used to like think that was bad or stupid or something like that. And now I'm just like, any way you get it into you, like one way. And if you just want to listen to, again, you want to listen to Taylor Swift, you want to listen to Dua Lipa or whatever, I'm like, there are things to be taken from that. And in the end, like, if it brings, as they say, if it sparks joy, it sparks joy. So, what
1,000%.
What are you going to do?
The same thing goes for movies too. Like people want to like deep dive in some of these independent films that like the casual viewer wouldn't know unless they knew where to look. And the same thing goes for music. And I think that with the invention of, I'll say the name we refuse to say, TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media thing pops up, I find that people are way more connected now and they know where to look or crate dig a little easier. But it's also way easier to...
Stuff shows up more easily now. Like look at the whole kind of Kate Bush thing from Stranger Things and TikTok.
Oh my God.
Which I love because that's one of the great... House of Love is one of the greatest records ever made by a human being. Like, ever.
I had never heard of it until Stranger Things. And then I'm like, holy crap, this whole catalog's great. And she did it all herself in the 80s.
Yep. And like using the height of technology at the time, which should sound dated. Like some of those synthesizer things like should sound dated, but they don't, because she used them in a way that was like so unique. And I do a whole show on how I feel about Kate Bush.
Well, I mean, it's amazing that, it's so easy to sound dated from the 80s. And you're right. Some of those synth parts really translated to now, especially that lead line in
running up that hill. That
one.
And you just listen to it and you're like, it's timeless. Like, it doesn't matter that thing, because like, sometimes things that are like the thing at the moment, the piece of technology, the sound, can very quickly become like, okay, and then we improve, we got better. But like, I don't think she was using it the way it was supposed to be used. You know what I mean? Like, and I also throw another name in there, like someone like Trent Reznor, or something like that, Nine Inch Nails. So much of his equipment was like custom built and cobbled together because he had a mind for that kind of stuff. And so that's why, like, if you listen to Nine Inch Nails Broken, which is like, 1992, 91 or something like that, it sounds like it could have been recorded a year ago. Like Downward Spiral, parts of it sound like that could have been recorded this year. Because again, you took a sound that no one else was doing and you made it yourself. You like literally conjure it out of thin air. And then you get stuff that's going to be, timeless forever and ever. I think as we move on into this, more in the box age, the digital age of production, all that, I think that there's so many more options for artists now for how they want to make their records sound, that the melting pot the pot itself is larger, and the things that we can throw in it are so many more. So you're just like, I want kind of a Fleetwood Mac sound on the drums, but I want kind of a Queen sound on the vocals. And hey, let's get a little replacements, dirtiness on that guitar. And like, boom, you've created this whole soup right there that like, if you listen to it, you wouldn't be able to pick out the disparate elements, just be like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, which is how I approach things.
The rest, the ingredients haven't changed, but the recipes have.
And the fact that like kind of there are no recipes anymore, like, which is fun, like I dig listening to, like drum sounds and stuff, even in pop music, and being like, oh, some of it's not as shiny anymore as it maybe was in the 80s and 90s, where everything was like super shiny and super pristine, because the early days of digital production and digital sources was all about like, oh, no static, no fuzz, none of that. And that was an era, that was a time, But
now everybody's like recording clean and then adding the fuzz in post, when they could have just done it with like a rinky.
You could have just made it sound weird the first time. And it's, and these things come and go, but now that I think that it's all kind of in the box, and like you can access this stuff fairly easily. And if you are well listened, and have an open mind for music and are just always taking things in, like you can really, really make some stuff,
What's speaking of timeless, if you met a lot of young people at this Inside Hustle thing, and I'm sure you got a lot of cards and business cards and people who are going to be on the podcast if you like the music. What would you say to somebody in if they asked you, how do I create music that is timeless?
I mean,
there's 1,000 answers, but what's yours?
Yeah, I think like within the asker lies the answer, like sort of a bizarre kind of Zen Buddhist way to think about that, of which I know absolutely nothing. But
so let's talk about it.
Yeah. So I'll pontificate on Zen Buddhism. I'm a all glasses and a beard.
All right, if you have to walk off, if you have to turn it off now, guys, we understand. But we're about to hop in.
It's the idea that like from within, your most authentic self is going to be the thing that no one else can ever touch. They can't touch it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I think about some of the artists that I hold very highly in my life, they're so authentically themselves, their version of humor, their tastes in music, and the fact that those tastes change. Like, so you just go, like, you have to kind of go inside and be like, what do I dig? Not what do I want to be like? Not even who do I idolize? It's just like, what do I dig? Like, when I hear something, what do I go, yeah, that. Start there and then write about the things that you're interested in. And so like if those things, like if you're not particularly interested in writing about songs about romantic love, that's fine. You don't have to write those songs. You can write them about your cat or going to the store or, driving around and getting pissed at people for driving like jerks. Like, I don't know, like you can make a song about anything as long as it's, an authentic. It's your POV. It's your point of view, because no one can take that because nobody has that.
1,000%.
I think of like the new. I mean, I've been an MJ Lenderman fan for a few years, but like I think of his records and his songs and the way he writes them, and he just comes at it the MJ Lenderman way. Whatever that is, that's his lifetime of experiences, and that's how he writes songs. So when he writes a song like Wristwatch or She's Leaving You, you're just like, that's him. I mean, the songs don't have to be about you, but like that's filtered through that guy's like psyche. And again, that's something that no one can ever take from you, no matter how big something gets. You can copy sound, you can copy motif, you can copy aesthetic, but you're never going to be Michael Stipe from REM. You're never going to do it. Like you could jump around, sing like him, like be that way. And like, but those lyrics and that way that band worked was all filtered between that band's experiences and just the people. So, I mean, you can love it and you can aspire to it. You can take pieces from things that you love, but be you, which is like hard because when you're starting out, you're just like, well, nobody knows who I am. And I'm just like, I know, nobody knows who anybody is until they do.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
I'm using that.
No one knows who you are.
Until they do.
And not even like a tell them what your name is type of thing. Like not even like, oh, you're going to have to know me. It's just like have something. And I feel about this about podcasts too. Have something to offer, like have a body of work in some way. So when they find you, there's something to go to. There's nothing more frustrating to me than to like go find a band that I've heard about. I'm like, oh, cool. And they go on and there's like 2 songs on the Big Green app. And I'm like, okay, look, I understand that not everyone can like record a record in their house or anything that's not in the hands of everybody. But you look and you're just like, you don't even have a website. Like you don't like you've got a link tree and an Instagram. And like I guess that's how people do things now. But I'm always looking for a little more, because if I'm going to have a long form conversation with you, here in this space that you're looking at on the mics, I need something more than like, we're a band, we have these 2 songs that we'd like people to listen to us. I'm like, okay, join the club.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not to say the music isn't worth listening to, but I was like, you have to have something about you that no one else has.
And there's got to be enough.
And it exists. Yeah, it exists. You have it. You might have to sit and think about it, but
it's funny because like, you meet all these artists or musicians and they want to be on the jump right away. Like I want to put out 3 songs and have over 1 million monthly listeners. And no, you'll fall apart trying to do that.
Also, like, what do you get from that 1 million monthly listeners if you have it? Like, if that's solely what you're going for, streams, clicks, numbers, we all know that from a monetary payback situation, it's fractions of cents on the dollar. Like, why would that be? That's an old way of thinking about things, and we've all learned that it doesn't pay off. even for the big cat, like for the big guys. Like, it doesn't even pay off for them anymore either. You could spend your time figuring out analytics and playlists and all that, and these are all important things. He says quizzically, but like, do you want to play live? Then like, get a live show together. Figure out what it's going to look like and sound like and feel like. And it doesn't mean you have to like spend a bunch of money on lights and costumes and like flashy instruments. Figure out what you're about and like go on stage. Like, if I walk into a club, I walk into a room and I'm catching the opening band, and I miss them coming on stage, and there's people on stage. Sometimes before the sound even like registers in my brain, I can just kind of look at them and just be like, all right, cool. This band knows what it's about. When I walked in to Milk Boy on Friday night for Philly Music Fest, the one band on the bill that I wasn't familiar with was the first band. They're called Queasy. I just walked in, and as the sound registered into my brain, and I looked at them on stage, and I was like, I know exactly what's going on here. Like, in a great way. I was like, yes, I know what this is. Like, this speaks to me of a certain era of music, of a certain style of music, and they're doing it themselves. But like, I'm standing in the back thinking like, oh, this is like seeing Rainer Maria in 2001, or like, seeing these like Midwest emo bands on polyvinyl records or something like that, like going to these showcases and seeing these bands. That's what it reminded me of. And I could just look at them and hear it and just be like, yep, this is what it says to me.
It's so funny that you bring that up, because I've been talking with some folks about this stuff. Is the visual importance more important than the audio aspect, in the sense of like, if some people do it, we don't like to admit it. People make judgments really early, especially if you're on a stage. So how much time should people be focusing on the visual side of all this stuff?
I mean, and amount of it, it all depends on,
I know it's case by case genre.
What kind of band do you want to be?
Right.
I've seen some bands that like really do it up. They got great, good clothes. They've got presence. They're jumping around. And then they like, but like, sometimes they're just like triggering synth samples or something like that. There's nothing wrong with it. If you showed up for that, then you showed up for that. Like, I went to go see Air, and like half that set was backing track samples, because there were just 3 of them on stage. Like,
right,
what are you going to do? You want to replicate the thing we came from. So I get it. And a band at that level, we know what we're coming for. But if you're introducing yourself to people, it's a fine line. It really is, because there's got to be something to look at. And I don't just mean like, is the lead singer hot?
That's an aspect to it.
I mean, but to me, that's less important, because also, what is conventionally attractive? As Brittany Trambaugh points out, like, we're all somebody's idea of a, hey, what's over there?
Yeah, she's exactly right.
And I love that song, and I love her for it, because it's a whole room of people, because nobody feels conventionally attractive, if you think about it. So the fact that you get a whole room of people in there all singing that song with her. So that's my Brittany Trambaugh sidetrack right there.
No, that's going to be her new setlist banger. Like, you saw us play at a Exponential Music Fest.
Oh, it was beautiful. You guys were so great. And it was just such a wonderful, like, early afternoon to spend right there.
Oh, it was perfect.
The weather was beautiful. And like, people, it's what I love about Exponential at WXPN's festival every year, is that the people who show up to that, very much like people show up to Philly Music Fest and like other things, they show up early. They want to see all of it.
Like true music fans, they want to see what else is there.
And like half those, I mean, there were a lot of people in that crowd who like, I was there for Britney.
Oh no, I saw the shirts. Yeah. Like, you can tell in the front who had seen Britney before.
Yeah. I always end up sitting near Britney's parents every time I see her. So like, I've started to get to know Mr. and Mrs. Tranbaugh. They're very wonderful people, you would imagine, because they created such a wonderful human. We're sorry, Brittany. We're making you blush. Please, you don't have to watch anymore. But I don't know where I'm going. But yeah, people show up and they want to see it. But when you get back to your question, is like, is it important to hit the visual aspect? Yeah, there should be. If you're doing a live show, there should be something to look at. That doesn't have to be people. But there should be something that catches as much as the sound. We're visual people. Like, even before screens and Instagram and YouTube all like in our back pockets. Like, we all, like the flicker of the images and the light that's just built into our human brains. So have something. I mean, you think back in the day, like Pink Floyd in their early days and like the Syd Barrett days, they would play the UFO Club in London, and they would just show like film or like prismatic stuff through slide projectors, like over the back wall. And that was the visual, like Velvet Underground showing Andy Warhol movies while they're, playing their loud caustic songs about S&M and like people are dancing with whips, and like the band kind of doesn't have anything to do with it at that point. So that could be your thing too. Be like, if you think about like going to see ska bands and there's always like one guy who's just dancing and his whole point is just to dance. He's like the hype man. He's like Flava Flav, but for, ska.
Oh my God, you're so right. And then on top of that, you think about like, your Grateful Deads or any of those bands from that era. Like it's mostly about the audience. It's not even about the band at that point.
Or the Lights.
The Lights.
We're both big Fish guys, and like I was watching the Sunday show last night on the stream, and just watching what Chris Kuroda is doing those Lights. And I still love in a band like that is that he'll do some configuration, and I'll be like, oh, I didn't know those could do that. And I've been watching this. I've been watching this band. I've been seeing this band play live since 1996. So like every time there's a new thing, oh, I didn't know. Like he did a thing last night, man. Without like trying to describe it, he did a thing last night that I just sat there. I was like, what the fuck? What? Like,
do you have a history in lights?
No,
like
I just dig them. I mean, I've messed with lights with people before, but like, no, I'm not a visually. If I were to talk about the areas of creativity that I lean into well, visual is not one of them.
Okay.
I'm more of a sound guy.
Well, you've done a great job. Every podcast that I've been on with you, and every episode I've seen, is really done really well. And I know that you do the episodes at your place typically.
Yep.
Which is when you said, you sure you want to come over today? I was like, yeah, but it works for me.
Whatever works for you. No, I know. And then this is fun too, because I just get to go downstairs and do my thing, and then I get to turn this off and just be like, all right, cool, now what?
Now that I've done that travesty, I can go on with my day.
It's interesting too to just kind of like get super engaged, because we all learned how to get super engaged like this, in the year 2020 and 2021. Mm-hmm. So, and then you kind of turn it off, and then I'm just a guy sitting in an empty room, just being like, okay, what just happened?
Yeah, but we created something, even though we may have blacked out, creatively. Yeah. But you create something online.
I've always been a like sonic. My creativity has always come in sound and like in words and like writing and talking.
Well, you know what? In that really is evident in your intros that I like to listen to. Sometimes you kind of just go for it and say what you got to say, but I can tell you are definitely well read, and I just love all your intros for everybody you have on the podcast. It's always interesting.
You have to do your homework, and you have to set people up, because like half the time I'm introducing people to these people. So when someone comes on, I'm hoping, and this is true, people listen to the show because it's the show. Like they don't necessarily know. I don't know who, this person or that band is or whatever. And that's fine. In fact, I think that's great. Mm-hmm. Because they're just like, I have no idea what to expect. And then they just listen to us talk, and the band represents itself well. And I do my best from a production standpoint and an editing standpoint to just make sure that I'm making the band or the artist or whoever my guest is sound as good as they possibly can. And that means going in and cutting out tangents, mostly my tangents, not typically not the guest's tangents.
No, I typically take mine out too.
Yeah, no, I do it too, and like just you clean it up, you tighten it up. I always tell artists, I said, I'm never editing like for content. I said I'm editing just to flow, just keep it moving, keep it rolling, because I always try and think of it from a listener standpoint. Be like, all right, when am I going to start to be like, okay, like, and when I can think like that, and if I get to the moment, like I'll hear something in an interview and just be like, okay, like one could tune out at this point. So I'm like, okay, what do I do about that? Because the job is solely on me at that point. Mm-hmm. It's not the guest's responsibility. It's not the listener's responsibility to power through. It's my responsibility to be like, okay, how do I present, an otherwise long form piece of media? How do I present it in a way that people, like the greatest, like Terry Gross or Mark Maron, where like you'll listen to, like, you talk to someone for like 70 minutes and you're just like, dude, that was great. I kind of want more. Like I was listening to the Keith Urban interview with him from a couple weeks ago, and I was just like, this is the best. And I don't give a shit about Keith Urban in any way. I do now.
Oh, but yeah, like, but it was fascinating. Mark Maron is one of the best interviewers of our time.
And one of the ways that he does it is because he rolls in and he feels people out. And sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes it doesn't work for me. Sometimes I have to pivot in the moment to be like, okay, I need to be a little bit more of a journalist here and a little less of a hang. And it's all about the guest and their level of comfort.
Right. Well, has that happened to you? Like, can you give me an example? Not naming anybody, but like an example of like when that did happen.
I've had people come on who maybe present on stage in a different way, and then they come and talk. And they're certainly not like closed mouth. I mean, they're coming to do an interview. Like it's not lost on them, but they're a lot, a lot more even keeled. They might talk a little softer. They might not seem as frenetic or fast as they seem on stage. And to me, that's again that's on me. Like for having decided that like, oh, well, the way you are on stage is the way you are in real life, because we all know that's not true at all for even some of the greatest, most famous people.
You mean Marilyn Manson just walk around in that makeup all day?
I don't want to talk about Brian Warner. Like,
well, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But...
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I grew up in an era of that kind of music, and like Manson was part of my. I wasn't a super fan, but I dug them. Like they were. So it's a bummer to like. I don't know. It's just a bummer without us going down the rabbit hole of like, the flaws and, nasty natures of people in general, much less famous people. But yeah, it's when and then I have to adjust how I'm approaching that. And that, again, the onus of that, the responsibility of that is on me. It is not the artist's or the guest's responsibility. The guest's only responsibility is to show up and bring themselves, like to bring an authentic version of themselves. And if I have a preconceived expectation that ends up not being what it is, then that's my fault.
Well, that, and also, I mean, for any interview, to accept to do any interview, you should be able to bounce off somebody, have a real conversation.
Yeah.
Like if you're a drag to talk to in real life, this is going to be a long hour.
Yeah,
or hour and a half.
And I've never had anyone on that I thought was. There's no one who's been a drag. There are people who get self-conscious. Like some people, especially at this level, that I deal with some artists. Like some of these artists, the longest they've ever gotten to talk about themselves, because there just simply isn't a normal output for that. It's all, quick reels, TikToks, little videos, like man on the street, asking stuff real quick. And when I was in bands too, even in the late 90s into the early aughts, like I used to get really like cranky. And on the rare occasions that we got interview where I should just be grateful that like anyone wants to talk about my stupid band, but I would just be like, but don't you want to, like, they would just ask the same questions, and I'd just be like, but aren't you interested in anything else besides like, who are your influences? Hey, how loud do you guys play? What kind of guitar is that? And like, those are all cool questions. Like I have guitars behind me and I have posters and art on the wall of bands and stuff like that. So when people come in, they'll point like, oh, what's that guitar right there? And we'll talk about it. Like, oh, what's that Bowie poster over there? And we'll talk. But,
But it's not deep. It's very, not saying that asking about those things is shallow, but there's only a certain amount of like.
Yeah. I mean,
meaning.
your standard interview questions. Where are you from? How long have you been together? How did you meet? But I love to go, and you do have to start somewhere.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying you don't do those, but don't have like a whole hour interview of just that.
Yeah. I always ask, I've asked it of you when you were on, I've asked it of anyone who's been on. The first thing I always ask, I'm like, what was the sitch growing up? Like, what was the deal? Music in the house, musical family? Are you the weirdo? Like, and I'm always interested in like, what was the thing? Because everyone has the thing. It might not be a specific thing, but a time or an age or whatever. I'm like, when did the lights come on? Where like, you hear something for the first time, or you experience music in a certain way for the first time. And if you're fortunate, you have those moments constantly. But it's like, what kind of like clicked your head in age? And a lot of people my age, is like, I saw such and such on MTV, or for me too, I can think of a number of people that I saw like on late night television, like, Saturday Night Live or Letterman or something like that. You just watch a performance and you're just like, and like the most common thing that goes through my head is like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. And that's my favorite stuff. I still get it today. I'll listen to music or I'll see someone perform and I'll just be like, oh, I didn't know. Oh, you can just do that.
Can I drop one on you real fast?
Sure. What is it? What's yours?
SNL, the episode where Kendrick Lamar was on. It was the last time he was on when I think it was when Damn, or no, it was the other record, the one with the family on the front. I can't remember the name of the record.
Good Kid, Mad City, or
no, that's way earlier.
That's right. Yeah.
But this record came out and he was the musical guest on SNL, and I was like sort of a fan. Like I enjoyed his stuff, but like he did this camera stuff, like perspective. The stage isn't moving, but the way the light was moving made the room move, and it was just like, what is happening? And it was phenomenal. I was a huge fan after that.
Yeah,
and I'm sure the same thing.
Yeah, I remember seeing like back when Odelay came out, play SNL, and me being like, okay, well, Beck is insane, and we know this, but like me watching his bassist was just like, what is going on over there? And that guy, and I want to, he was a producer. He produced like the first 2 Paramore records and all that. Like, he's a really interesting cat. I cannot remember his name, but like that whole band was just a trip to watch. And just, like watch Beck do like Where It's At live and just running around screaming into a harmonica microphone. And again, just me as a teenager, just being like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Or like the first time I heard a band like, like Soul Coughing or something like that. These weird 90s bands, like these weird bands that kind of got, swept up in the net of just trying to find something. Bands like Morphine, bands like the Butthole Surfers, bands like Flaming Lips, or like, That Dog or something like that. Just these weird, you just like, what? But like at the time, everything was on the table. Anything could potentially be the next thing. So I was very into the idea of like, well, what is that? What's happening over there? Like the first time I saw Smashing Pumpkins on television, I was like, well, they don't look, in the moment, I'm like, they don't look standardly cool, which means they might actually be the coolest people in the world. They look like a bunch of nerds. Of course.
Like, but the opposite is true.
Felt like that. I didn't feel, you never do. Even the people that like present in a certain way, like no one feels like, oh, I've got it together. I'm the portrait of cool. Like no one thinks that. Even people that you think are cool. But like there was like an era, and like that's the thing I've loved about like really like arty music and stuff like that, is that like the people who do this, like people are huge dweebs. Like Talking Heads, they're huge dweebs.
Oh my God,
they're the best. It's the best. Or like Parliament, like. You look at them and you think like, oh, they're a bunch of like cool soul people and all that. And they have that, but they're also insane and like the weirdest people ever because to be in a band like that and like write that kind of music and perform the way you do, like wear a diaper on stage, bassist in a wedding dress, a freaking UFO comes out on stage and George comes out. Like you have to intentionally want to do that. That's not an accident. Like you're just like, no, to us, this is the most authentic version of ourselves. And I love that in weird. And I feel like as we chase, clicks and likes and TikTok and Instagram and whatever that thing that's going to come out next year that changes all that, like people want to fit in. And that's a drive for just human nature in general. Yeah. But like, I feel like because we're always looking at these like shined up, idealized versions of things, and we think if we don't measure up to that, then like we're not as good. But like, I don't know. I like watching a bunch of weird kids in a basement, like just like crank out like gnarly, buzzed out guitar rock or whatever, just being like, they don't care what they look like. They don't care what you think. They're doing this because they have to. Like it's in them, and the only way to get it out is to like.
And that visual makes people interested, and then they usually like the music after that.
Yeah. You think about a band like, I mean, they're no longer a band anymore, but a band like Screaming Females or something like that. You like go to see them, and you're just like, ow. Like, they do not care. I mean, they care that we're there, and they care about the community, but it's like, they don't care what, like, the people in charge, think. It's like what John Devin's manager said at the thing. He's like, keep the adults out of the room for as long as humanly possible. And I fully I applauded that. I was like, yeah. I'm like,
I hope the rest of the attendees took that in, because that was such a really pivotal phrase.
He got onto the idea. It's like, it's the play, it's the collaboration, it's the group, it's the camaraderie. Or if you're by yourself, it's that like, this is a songwriter and so do I. Like it's that itch that gets scratched when you freaking figure it out. Like when you're bashing your head against verse 3 and you're just like, I don't know, I said everything I needed to say. What am I saying? And then you find that line that you're like, oh, that. And then you're just like, oh, no, wait, no, verse 3 is actually verse 1 right now. And you just, boom, and you're going. And like, I don't know, like the world could be on fire around me. Like dinosaurs could be back on the earth. Like it could be the weirdest, wildest thing happen. And I'm just like, shoop, like, no, you're just laser focused on this creative pursuit. And I think all real artists experience that, whether you're painting or writing a poem or, whatever. Like can you shut the whole rest of the world off while you do what you're doing? And if the answer is yes, I think what you're doing is probably pretty great.
And it also goes the other way. Can your music turn the world off for other people?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think
that's the mark. If you can get somebody to listen to a couple tunes of yours and they just stop paying attention to whatever's happening around them, you got something. It's in one place I talk about on the podcast is McGillen's. I grew up on that open mic scene in my 20s, and if you could hold a crowd at McGillen's for 15 minutes, with your original stuff has something.
Yeah. Or I think Fergie's open mic too, or something like that. If you can capture the room in your 10 minutes, then that's amazing. Yeah, no, it really is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And you know what? The same goes for podcasting. So to be able to, like you said, like, you're editing these podcasts and stuff and making sure people pay attention. What's something about music podcasts maybe people don't know that we have to do?
I think about in podcasting in general, anytime you're going to have a conversation, if it's conversation based, if it's not segment, like if you're not making like a variety show, if you're essentially not trying to make a radio program and then just put it out podcast style, which is a totally legitimate thing to do. And I know people do amazing things like that. But just because it sounds like it doesn't have a lot of moving parts is not true. Like the amount of the amount of planning that goes into getting a guest, the amount of planning that goes into putting an episode up on time, on a schedule. You have to have it. Decide what that schedule is. It could be once a month. It could be once a week. It could be every other week. Every other, like bi-weekly for me is like why the show has existed for as long as it has. If I went weekly, I would have fizzled out the first year and a half.
Oh my God.
It's a lot. I do weekly now because I have, if any, like I've got the muscle memory and like I'm trained to do it. Like there's enough parts of this show that are the systems just run themselves. And you're just like, cool, I just have to engage that system and it does what I do. Now, I still, drop the ball, whereas in this week, I don't send out an email till Sunday. When it just happened. It was Philly Music Fest week.
Dude, you had a crazy week. Stop blaming yourself for stuff. Like, yeah.
But then I lean into that in the interview. I'm like, why am I bothering these nice people on a perfectly acceptable Sunday? I don't know, but here I am.
You can bother me any Sunday, Dan.
Yeah, no, but it was, I actually, if you want to talk analytics right there, I got initially much better, email response numbers sending out a Sunday.
I believe you.
Everyone's sitting around playing with their phones, trying not to think about what's going on next week.
And then on top of that, what's funny is that social media is terrible on Sundays, but like emailing is amazing on Sundays, which is.
I should be better on Sundays. I should drop reels on Sundays.
No, I'm saying socials are terrible on Sundays.
No, it's good. We gotta give people something worth looking at.
It's not that. It's just I found that whenever I post something
everyone's getting ready for the week and all that bullshit.
But I think your email, that's interesting. Email on a Sunday. But you're
I didn't mean to, but there it was. Yeah. But that's something that people don't always understand about podcasts. And I get asked a lot to, consult and talk to people about it. And honestly, the thing I just say right off the bat, I probably sound like a dick when I'm doing it, but I'm really not trying to be that way. I mean, I might be a dick, but like, I'm not trying to be like that. I'm do you have an idea? And they're like, what? I go, do you know what it's about? And if they're if the answer isn't yes, it's this. If they talk at me for like another 30 seconds, I'm just like, you don't know what it is yet, which is fine, but go find what it is and then come back. And then then we can talk about because it's like building anything. It's like building a house. If you don't know how many floors it's going to have, if you don't know how big it's going to be, if you don't know how many doors, how many windows, where you even want to build it, like to really beat this metaphor into the ground, then you ain't got a house there, man. And you certainly can't start drafting it.
No.
You certainly can't lay a foundation until you know all these things. It's not going to be great. Its sustainability is going to be very difficult, and it's not going to have much of a life. So yeah, that's always my thing that I say to like prospective podcasts or whatever. I'm like, know what it is and what it's going to be about, and like being in a band, have it be something that you are authentically interested in. Don't do a true crime podcast if you don't give a shit about true crime. Like,
don't do it for the numbers just because you want to be popular.
Yeah, don't do a finance. Oh, I'm going to do stuff about crypto. It's not even about do you know anything about crypto. Like, you can learn anything quickly enough. There's enough information out there that can be synthesized. If you don't care about it, if you don't care about, modern real estate practices, which if you really care, then like I would listen to that show, at least for a little bit, just because you can tell, even when the subject matter isn't like, to me, something that maybe I'm interested in. Like, I'm not a sports guy. I don't listen to a lot of sports. But there's certain sports things, especially like on some of the ESPN podcasts that they make, where like I kind of don't care that it's about sports. They're just so good at it.
Oh yeah.
It's why everybody loves the 30. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a sports guy, but like the 30 is tight. Like I watch the 30 just to watch it happen.
When you say the 30, you mean the 30 by 30 like documentary style?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And it shows how little I know about sports. I don't even know what the hell to call it. But those short, tight docs on ESPN. Like I said, I don't know who these people are. Some of them I do because I remember them from when I was younger. But like,
But they present it in such a really entertaining way and informative too. But like not like where you're hitting you over the head with the textbook.
The format is so tight. I'm almost there for the format. Like,
that's interesting.
I kind of don't care what they're talking to me about. Like, and then I learn stuff about people, and then you learn about, you learn that like some sports guys have like these incredible inner depths and stuff like that. Because you're just like, well, yeah, they're so devoted and passionate to a thing, and that's similar to artists. Like, we're so devoted and passionate to a thing that like we do actually maybe have a lot in common with like people who are athletes at a certain level, because you have to basically build your whole life around this one thing that you want to do. And we can certainly say the same for a lot of artists and creatives out there. You built your whole life around this one thing, this one kind of thing that you want to do.
And on top of that, they have to retire.
Yeah. And there's some artists that I think have to retire too, but
or maybe we should insight. Maybe you should go.
Maybe you're done. Maybe you've peaked.
Just, look,
that's fine. Leave them wanting more.
Love Stevie Nicks. I love Stevie Nicks.
Yeah.
I even got to drink with Stevie Nicks' band at one time when they toured through Philadelphia, just because people that I knew. But if you saw her on SNL the other week, it was like,
yeah. I feel sometimes
and I might take this out, but
yeah, no, and I feel that sometimes we have like Bob Dylan, but then I'll watch what he's doing, and I'm just like, but he's so flippin' into it. Like, he loves what he's doing. That man doesn't have to do anything ever again.
Yeah, you saw the quote about him and Timothy Chalamet.
No, I didn't.
He was really pissed off about Timothy Chalamet portraying him. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna dress as Timothy Chalamet and go on to his set. How does he feel about that? He was really pissed off about it.
Yeah, but whatever, man. Like,
he's making money off that movie.
He's making money off that movie. I haven't seen it yet. Tim Chalamet's a great actor, so like,
is it out?
Is it?
I don't think so.
Maybe, but Tim Chalamet's a great actor, and like, I don't know. He wouldn't do the part. He's an artist. Like, he's also, a highly in demand movie star, but like, he's an artist, and like, he's going to come at that with something that he thinks like gives it legs. And those are your real artists right there. Like, you ever seen the I'm Not There film? It's like
it's on my list. I never have the day.
So good. But like, Cate Blanchett as like electric era Dylan, like, it's so good.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
It's wonderful. Richard Gere, like, it's all aspects of Dylan played out through different actors. It's phenomenal.
Okay.
Christian Bale as like kind of the freewheeling era Dylan. No. Christian Bale is the Born Again version of Dylan. Richard Gere plays kind of like the Desire era like motif of Dylan. Cate Blanchett plays, black suit, sunglasses, big hair era of
and
Dylan.
She pulls it off?
Oh, it's the best.
That's interesting.
Like, and she gets up there and, I mean, as the character, and does Ballad of a Thin Man. And when Kate opens her mouth, who's dubbed in for the voice?
No.
Steve Malkmus from Pavement. I know, right? I wouldn't have known that unless somebody told me.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And you're just like, but think about that. It's like this amalgamation of like all these aspects to create this otherworldly, because it's a movie, it's a film. Like, we're not going for accuracy here. Even documentaries don't go for accuracy.
No.
Bob Dylan documentaries, even the ones that he's in, he's being like, yeah, but don't take any of our words for this.
Oh, this is clearly entertainment. Yeah, like, this is not, anyway.
But anyway.
But talking about, like, you've done this music podcast for 10 years. You know the ins and outs of this at this point. Who's the guest that completely changed your perspective, either of them or on the music that they produce or that they're around? Like, somebody who changed your perspective in the 10 years you've done this.
I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who have said a lot of very interesting things to me, all from their experiences. Honestly, I wouldn't even say it would be like a performing artist. I would say it would be someone from like the what I call the back of house world of the music world. It's like what Greg Seltzer was talking about at Inside Hustle. Artists are in the middle of the wheel. They're the hub of the wheel. And a lot of us are the spokes. And the spokes, than any wheel, like spokes have to be strong. Spokes have to support. But spokes also have to be like rooted in something too. So I think when I talk to Lisa Schaefer, the concert photographer. She's been shooting shows for over 20 years, 25 years. Started like shooting bands, ended up shooting a photo that was Amos Lee's album cover, and she didn't know, and it was just
Which
wild.
one?
An early one, like early aughts one. I don't remember which one. But she had just some of the most remarkable things to say about photo shoots and photo sessions and what you need to bring as an artist, because she shoots a lot of artists. And like, they sound like no-brainer things, but like all the best pieces of wisdom when presented to you, the ones that really stick, you just kind of sit there and you're just like, it's that simple, huh? Or not that simple, but you're just like, the A to B point right there is like, well, yeah, of course. And her thing that she said, she's like, know what you want to look like. Like, just know what you, don't just hire a photographer and just be like, use your fancy gear to make me look good. She's like, think about it. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to have a photo taken of you? Don't just like shoot a photo at the railroad tracks or by a brick wall, unless like that particular brick wall is like,
it means
something to you. She came and shot me for this for like kind of my press rollout, and also like I just dig hanging out with Lisa Schaefer.
She's so fun.
Just we cut up and like we'll say and then we'll tell each other things that like kind of like, well, yeah, like it's just a wonderful person. I wish I ran into her more, not at shows, because like she's working, so I can't be bothering her. But like we like carefully we selected where we were shooting, and it was like either in my studio or like on the street by my home, like in my neighborhood, because she's like, well, this neighborhood is who you are. She's like, it's not even necessarily podcasts. If the podcast is who you are, vis-a-vis the neighborhood would be who you are. And she shot some really amazing photos, like just really great stuff. Also, because she knows what she's doing, but she was able to put me in situations and in places where she's like, yeah, be like this. And I was totally comfortable with it. Or, you'll talk to someone like Helen Light.
We mentioned her in the last podcast we did together.
She's
yeah.
And the way she talks about like radio in the 70s and 80s, and like, she just has remarkable perspective on that stuff. You talk to someone like Jesse Lundy, who's been, booking bands in this city for over 20, 25 years at this point, and his perspectives about, the relationship between talent buying and artists, and, the relationship between venues and artists and markets and artists. And it's just, we're fortunate that when you ask someone like him, is that he's thought a lot about it and thought a lot about how he wants to talk about it. And say what you will about any particular talent buyer, because there's many people that love them. There are people that don't love them because like they didn't give them what they wanted. But then you also have to ask, like, why didn't they give me what I wanted? Like, we're all in this the same. Maybe what I wanted isn't something they can give. And like, getting perspectives like that. So I certainly, I can talk songwriting with anyone, and I can talk guitar playing, and I can talk technique and playing shows and tour life and all that. And that's fun. I like those conversations. But I like it when someone comes in who's like coming at it from a whole different angle. One of my first episodes was this guy named Bill Platt, who worked for tour merch companies.
Cool.
And I never thought about that. But after my conversation with him, I'm like, I know a lot more about the tour merch world than I ever would have.
Into that.
I found it fascinating.
Okay.
Like, I was like, yeah, because like you show up to a show, you buy a shirt, you buy a record. How does it get there? Who's running it? What's the back of house on that? What's the sales? Like, what's the point of sale? Like, these are all like, if you're a nerd about this stuff, like you're a nerd about all of it. And so like, I am interested. I'm like, yeah, how do you basically create a small store for the band everywhere you go? And then how do you make sure that people know where it is and that they can access it, and all that?
It's fascinating too, because like it's something that we do not talk about, A, as an artist, or B, as music fans, and like everyone that works back a house has like a very unique perspective, and they're rarely interviewed about it.
Yeah. But I find that those people, I have some of the most interesting conversations with them, because they don't have a record. Like, when you come on to talk about your record, I want you to talk about your record. Like, we want to talk about the record, the process, and the fun, and all that, all the fun of creating. But when people come on and it's like, well, we don't have a record to talk about, what are we going to talk about? And then they just start like telling stories and like talking about perspectives and how they grew. And like, I remember talking to Julian Booker, who is a lot of things. He's a musician. He's fronted bands. He's had great bands. He's on the radio. He's a personality that way. He's a great house mixer and all that. He said to me that he decided early on in the production days of God, what was that place?
I don't know where he worked.
Blockley Poorhouse.
He worked at the Blockley?
The Blockley.
I didn't know
A lot of that crew from the Blockley went on to Ardmore Music Hall. But he told me that he had just decided, he goes, I'm not wearing stage blacks to work. Like, that's not what we're going to be about here. He's like, you can wear blacks if you want. He's like, I'm not doing it, and I'm not making anyone do it. He's like, because we're all people here. We're all people, and we're all serving this one thing, which is to make a great show. He's like, and I don't want to differentiate. He's like, one, he's like, I don't really like wearing that stuff all the time. He's like, and two, he's like, I don't want to wear this costume where it's like, I'm the help. It's like, no, man, I'm part of this. We're all part of this, you know?
That's interesting, yeah.
And I loved it. It was such a cool perspective. Again, I never would have thought of it. But he was like, yeah, I don't want to wear stage blacks. He's like,
we're not the help. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we are here. It's a difference.
We're here to help
you,
but not. But yeah, like
not
be
the help.
spoken down to with with this outfit situation. That's interesting. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, and I also understand that stage blacks have like a logistical thing, which is when you're in the wings, it's best not to be seen.
Right.
But he's like, I'm at the soundboard. He's like, people can look at me or not look at me. He's like, I'm not gonna wear a rainbow wig and a spangly jacket unless it's Halloween. Or if that's your thing, you know.
In which case, you blend in anyway.
If Parliament comes on stage, you wear whatever you want, man. Everyone's having a good time.
Damn straight.
But I just loved that. He's like, no, we're not going to do that here. And I loved it. Like, what a great perspective. And, you know, I don't know if you'd ever get that perspective from someone who was just like a straight standard artist.
That's true. Wow, you just opened my mind. Maybe you're going to be my influence guy. I'm going to have to interview more spokes unless
they're the best. They're the best.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I always have a blast.
Speaking of always having a blast, though, I always love having you on, man.
I try to be a blast. I try to bring the blast.
I try to be a blast.
Try. Well, I mean, but that's the fun about talking about this with anybody is that like I don't feel like I have to. I'm not trying, you know. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying. Like I'm trying to do a great job. I'm trying to make a great show. I'm trying to engage really well with artists. But the fact that some of that comes easily or feels effortless, like, I don't think it's because I'm not doing a good job. I think it's because, like, I'm probably pretty good at this then if it feels, you know, if it feels right. Mm-hmm. It's like when you sit down to play the drums and you play a part, and even if it's a technically hard part or something like that, if you feel like it flows, it's not because, like, oh, well, that's because that part's easy or whatever. It's like, who cares? Like, if you can do it and it feels effortless, then, like, there's part of that means like it's because you're good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's something to be said about like working on the craft and showing up every day. Like you show up every Sunday to send out your emails.
I try to send them out on Tuesday or Wednesday, sometimes Thursday. Sunday, that was a first. Sunday was a first.
I don't know, but you seem to get a response pretty quick. Maybe that's your new MO.
People shot emails back. I was like, love it, love the Mondo interview, love Mondo Cosmo, and I'm like. Also, it's so funny when you bring on these artists who like technically don't live in Philly anymore, but still have Philly ties. And that happens a lot at Philly Music Fest time. Josh Mondo Cosmo lives in Los Angeles, but like I don't know, man, he's still a Philly guy. Like, because he's so entrenched in this Philly world, you know, with his band Eastern Conference Champions and like all that. Like it still counts. Like you can move away and. It still counts. It's weird, though. I have this weird sliding scale in it, though. If you weren't here very long and then you move away, I'm like, I don't know. You got to come back.
That's
like
different.
Before. Yeah. And I won't name names, but like I have like a semi-controversial list in my head of people where I'm like, they're not really silly.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't say it out loud.
We can talk about it off air.
When I do say it to people are just like, really? And I'm just like, I'm like, again, it's a bullshit opinion to have. I don't know why I'm saying it. I don't know why anyone's listening to me.
That's because you've been here for 10 years and you've beaten most other shows, and
shows for 10 years. Yeah, it's impressive to do anything that long.
A Philly music connoisseur. In fact, I think in just this conversation, I think I have 30 names that I've written down in my mind. I have to make sure to go look up before the end of the day.
It's like a clickable, like, what's the thing? It's like all annotations at the bottom of the page. And then you go to the back of the book and there they all are.
Yeah, my little index or glossary. I'm going to have to go through them all later and be like, what the heck is this?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do that with people too. Like when I interview people, they'll start naming these bands or these, of eras that like I wasn't here for, I wasn't familiar with, and I'm just like, and I have to go back later when I'm editing and just be like, all right, I have to make sure that I know who that is. I gotta make sure that like, I know what that was or that old club or those bands that used to play there.
In fact, we should create a some sort of a playlist that has all these people that we've learned about.
No, I mean,
A collaborative podcast playlist.
It'd be massive because I'm always
get
learning
lost.
about people. And also, you got to remember that not everything's out there on the old big green app.
Yeah.
Not everything exists there, and that's a whole other conversation to have right there. But I don't know, that's sometimes scary to me. That like, oh well, if you're not part of these 2 to 3 major things, do you even exist? And the answer is, of course you do. But if no one can find you, then like that's sort of a moot point now, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
YouTube's still good for it though. If there's some weirdo who has your record and like puts it up on YouTube, God bless those people.
I've seen some of those videos.
Because that's how you find like old stuff that's on old defunct labels that didn't get swallowed up by any of the larger publishing groups. Like,
do you know Paul Wilkinson by chance?
Who?
Paul Wilkinson.
I don't think so.
He plays in Mason Porter.
I remember Mason Porter.
Yeah. So he really big beard, long hair, plays guitar and bass and sings. But he does that. He has like a series that he posts like old clips from YouTube of records that don't exist anywhere.
Yeah.
And really interesting stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm a big Discogs head too, like sometimes dangerously so. Speaking of which, after I interviewed Mondo Cosmo, he talked about this band Trip 66, who were a big deal in the late 80s into the 90s here in Philadelphia. I've talked to people. In fact, Lisa Schaefer reached out to me and said, like, oh my God, I thought that band was the coolest band in the world, And so I was like, I know nothing about this band. So I went to the Green app and they weren't there. And I went to Discogs and I found a used copy of their first LP on vinyl, and I bought it because I was like, because it was low price, and then I had to buy more things from that seller because if I'm paying shipping, I'm paying shipping,
Mm-hmm.
So I bought a bunch of weird indie 7-inches that like I don't need, but
you have now.
Maybe I did need them. I don't know. We don't know that.
That's the universe, man. I'm starting to believe more and more that the universe is sending us things.
Yeah.
Like,
so I'm really excited for that Trip 66 record to show up in the mail so I can throw it. I don't know what they sound like.
It's going to be so fun.
But they were, Josh talked about in his days as a teenager, like they were like very cool to him and like kind of took him under their wing just to like hang out. And like along with that, even if you never go on to like have a music career, which Josh obviously did, it's just nice when like you get to hang out with the older kids when you're that age. Like they're going to show you stuff. They're going to show you stuff. If you're in bands, they show you stuff about guitars and amps and playing, and they're probably going to give you beer for the first time and other things, and that's fine. Like let's not, as long as it's done responsibly in a way that's good. Like that's how you learn to be a human, is people showing you stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and giving you experiences, and hopefully those experiences are good ones. We won't delve too much for conversation's sake into like the other kind of darker side that can take, but like I don't know, I was always down when like the older kids or the older bands would like show us some stuff or just like talk to us. When you're a teenager and you go see a band, the very fact that you're on stage, like a band is on stage, means that like, well, you're probably famous, which means I should talk to you. Like if you talk to me after the show, like, wow, the famous guy on stage talked to me, when really you're just like, they're just some touring band, and like 10 years from now, you're going to be in the same place as them and like feeling not famous, but like some kids in the crowd who like are just starting their first band are just like, whoa.
Yeah.
And you have to acknowledge that. You have to kind of show up for that.
Mm-hmm.
You are responsible for that. Some artists be like, I'm not responsible for how anyone takes this, or I'm like, you are, man, you are a little bit. So
it's the community. It's absolutely about that.
Yeah, we're all responsible to each other.
And Dan, if I may say so, you're one of the greatest older kids that let us come and play in your little world, and I appreciate you being here.
Oh, it's just my little world. And people are welcome anytime.
Oh, I'm coming over.
Oh, you see? Are you outside right now? That's weird.
Yeah. This is actually a pre-recorded interview that I've timed perfectly.
It's messed up. Wow, you're good at that.
I'm not very good at this, but you have anything fun coming up in the new year, or even at the end of the year?
So, yeah, let's do this at the end, because I didn't want to mention this in the beginning of the show, because I didn't want the rest of the show to be about this. So this will be an easy way to go out, and you'll kind of be like, what? I've already, when does this come out?
In about 2 weeks. Let me double check
Okay,
that. Hold on. November the 12th.
2 weeks is great. because my end of putting this information out will already be out, and like 2 weeks will be good because like people have already like maybe heard of it. Come early 2025, I will be leaving Philadelphia for at minimum 2 years.
What?
Yep. It's something I've kind of kept close. The decision was made back in like late August. But I kept it close because of the compilation and the support of Philly Music Fest and all that. And I knew that I was going to be doing press, and I didn't want like the beginning of it to all be front loaded. Like, what do you mean you're leaving? Like, then like the whole interview is about something that I don't have answers for. But yeah, come by February 2025, I will be somewhere else, and that somewhere is Hong Kong in Southeast Asia. My partner got a very, very good job contract out there with the university. So
Congratulations!
We're gonna give it a whirl. We're gonna give it a shot.
That's amazing. Oh, you're gonna have so much fun.
I know, and it's you vacillate between excitement and terror.
A little bit.
Which it's bizarre. But like we're very much looking forward to it, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing another completely different kind of music community, because it exists over there. It's different, very different from this, and my approach and my way in will be very different because I don't have 20 years, of past experience and people that I have in this city. And I'm older now than I was when I started doing this, because that's how that works. But yeah, and I'm sure the question you will have, and what everyone else will have, is like, well, what will become of the show? Certainly the archive will exist forever, as long as I'm alive and able to keep the archive up of 330 something conversations or more. It will exist. I don't know what the show looks like while I live on the other side of the world. To me, it would be disingenuous to attempt to still cover the Philadelphia community while not living here. Like, we can do everything over the internet. We can talk and we can send music back and forth, but like, if I can't go to shows and I can't, it's not the same. I can still be. Then I'm sort of looking forward to like getting into a point of like, I just get to be a very far removed Philadelphia music fan.
I'm gonna miss you so much.
I'll be back. Like,
in 2 years.
Well, no, I mean, we're gonna come back to the country too to like visit and stuff like that.
Okay.
Like, everyone I know lives here.
I know, but still, I'm happy for you. I'm just a little sad.
Yeah, no, I'm sad too. I've lived in this city for over 20 years. This place formed me, not just as a music person, but as a person. Between the ages of your early 20s and your mid 40s, like a lot happens, and it all happened to me here. So, it will always be a part of me.
Have you thought about somebody taking the mantle for you while you go?
You're not the first person who's mentioned that. Brendan from Stella Ruse, he's like, you should hand it over. The answer is, I will not. And that has nothing. It can sound weird and sort of possessive, but like, I built this from the ground up. I decided what it was and how it was and when it was and what it did. And I want someone else to do that. Like, if someone else decides to take up the mantle of being like, well, I'll do a long form interview podcast with Philadelphia musicians, that's awesome. They could do that right now.
I think I'm doing that right now.
Here. And I wouldn't have, I mean, you to a point do it. There's a lot of other people that like do versions of this.
Yes.
I want people to do their authentic version of the thing, because also 25 o'clock will still exist in some way or another. It won't be, a long form Philadelphia music podcast anymore, but maybe it'll involve my discoveries, overseas. Maybe it will involve conversations with other expats and people who have come from communities. I still don't know what it will be, but it will be something. Certainly not to the frequency that it happens now. There's going to be a lot of other things to figure out over there. But
wow.
But yeah, it will be something. My email list will still be active. I started a Substack too. I'm just like, maybe I'll lean more into writing. I've always liked writing as well. Maybe I'll lean into that. Shorter things on the internet, videos of stuff and music and things I discover, and still kind of trying to check in with my friends over here back in Philadelphia and back in the States. Because like I said, I've been here for so long. It's not like you flip a switch and you're just like, oh, I don't care about Philadelphia anymore. That's impossible. And anyone who can do that probably never cared much to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So yeah, I get to drop that on you, but I do at the end.
Well, I won't ask any more about it because it's clear that you're like still mulling over some of the details. But
Well, yeah, I don't know what it's going to, I don't know what the show is going to be. I don't know what my life is going to be, but it's going to be interesting. I will tell you that much, and I like to keep it interesting.
well, I'll tell you what, man, you're nothing short of interest. Like, you are just one of the most interesting dudes I've ever met, and I can't wait to give you a giant hug the next time I see you.
Yeah, man, I'm still out and about until February. So if you
Oh,
see
no,
me,
you're gonna get lots of hugs now that
no,
I
so
know.
if you see me out at a show or see me out and around, like come up and say, hey, even if we've never met before.
Yeah,
like,
make sure if you're listening and you want to say hi to Dan, he will say hi back.
I will say hi for way too long.
You are a celebrity for sure.
Yeah, I sort of. Yeah, it's. I'll end with a quote from my brother, who's a producer and he works in clubs and stuff. He's a music guy like me, and he works with some pretty known names. And his son, my nephew, will tell these stories at school, and people will look at me like, you know who you're talking about, right? And so he actually would come home now that he's older and ask his dad. He'd be like, Dad, are you famous? And my brother gives the quickest answer he gives is like, no, son, we work in the business.
Yeah.
So that's how I think about it with my, like, people are like, oh, you're Philly famous. I'm like, there's part of me, of course, that loves the accolades, but I'm like, no. I work. Like, I have a job to do, a job that I created for myself. But like, I'm like, no, we work in the business. And that's, I think if more people thought of it like that, even when you're a performer, you're part of a community. You work as part of the community. So, no one's famous. We're all just working.
It's a really good way to send it out, man. And thank you for being on. I love you.
Oh, man. I love you too, buddy. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, we're already at an hour 20. I could easily go for another 40 minutes or 2 hours. But regardless, I'm sure people got things to do. I love you. Thank you for being on, man.
Dude, thank you.